Well, hello everybody. It's now 7 o'clock and we're ready to start the webinar. So can I ask Roy and Sam to join me? I'm delighted again to have Sam Booth, who's subject lead at the Oak National Academy, particularly for design technology, with us. Hi, Sam. And then also Roy Ballum, who was the curriculum lead and then also the content writer for the lessons for Oak National Academy Cooking and Nutrition over the last 18 months. So both Sam and Roy are very, very knowledgeable and experienced around all of these lessons. So great to have them both with us online tonight. So this is the third of the webinar series that we've been running for Oak. We've called it Oak Food Curriculum to Classroom. So in order to try and help teachers implement the Oak cooking and nutrition lessons in the classroom, that's both primary and secondary teachers. So a couple of things before we start. So the webinar is being recorded and will be available on Food Effective Life. If you've got any questions, particularly for Sam and for Roy, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end. We have also got a little bit of time at the end put aside for any particular questions. So you can either put them in the chat box as you go along or save them up to the end. And then at the end of the webinar, we'd be grateful if you could please complete a short evaluation. The QR code is on the screen now. If you wanted to get that up your phones and ready, that's brilliant. But if you can leave it to the end to do it, that'd be fantastic. Once you have submitted it, you'll be given a link which takes you to the Food Effective Life website, and you'll be able to download your certificate, add your name to it, and then you can print it out and keep it in your records. One thing I have guys that I haven't actually introduced myself. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Frances Meek and I'm Education Services Manager at the British Nutrition Foundation. So first of all, just again to welcome you this evening. It's brilliant that you've been able to join us, particularly after a busy teaching day. And I always like to start off just saying thank you very much to our funders. So the All Saints Educational Trust, the funding from them has enabled us to run this webinar series, but also create the resources that we've got on the Food Effective Life website to support you in implementing the Oak lessons and curriculum. So what are we going to do today? So we're going to look at the curricular aims and purpose. We're going to look at the curriculum structure, and that covers lots of different things like threads, units and lessons, but particularly within a focus of a social context. We've got 108 lessons across primary and secondary, so Roy's going to talk through those. We're going to look at the practical food work and particularly around embedding knowledge whilst doing practical activities. And then right at the end, we're going to have a think about some of the further support and resources available for you and some of the next steps. I mentioned this is the third of our webinars. The previous two have been recorded and this also is being recorded. And the recordings are available on the website. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, we're just going to sort of lightly cover because we may have covered them previously in the other two webinars. So if you want to know more, please do have a look back on those webinar recordings. And then the PowerPoint presentations are also available for you to have a look at with various links in. Okay, I'm now going to pass over to Sam, and Sam's going to tell you about the curriculum aims and purpose, particularly to do with cooking and nutrition. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much. Right, can you hear me, Frances? That all good? Amazing.
Yes, we can.
Right,
you.
yeah. Sorry, I just took my jumper off because it's actually I've got the heating on for once. I think it's the first day I've had the heating on. It's very chilly in the north of England here. So I have touched on this briefly in the first webinar that we covered. So I'm not going to cover everything again in full detail. But I thought it was really important that we do start with kind of what I started with when I came to Oak 2 years ago, and that's the Oak curriculum principles. Now, no matter what subject you are teaching at Oak National Academy, if you're using our resources, you will find these principles embedded throughout every subject, whether it's RE, PE, or cooking and nutrition. But to frame them in the terms of cooking and nutrition, just briefly, once again, because I think that's an important thing to do when we're talking about the aims of this curriculum and the purpose of this cooking and nutrition curriculum. We obviously are knowledge and vocabulary rich, and you will see this in our explainer that we talk about that substantive and the really important procedural knowledge within our curriculum and how that is built over time. If you've already looked at our resources, you will see keywords are mapped across the curriculum. We highlight those within every single lesson, and you'll see that's there to support learning. And we thought very carefully about that. We are sequenced and coherent. We carefully think about how we are sequenced and coherent as well. And if you have started using our threads, I think they're a great way of actually navigating our resources on our website by highlighting those different threads and seeing how they build over time. I think another aspect of the sequence of coherence is the document that Roy has shared, his planning document, where you can actually see it in a linear format rather than our website. And I think that's a real key aspect of being able to see, for example, if you're looking at food provenance, you can see how that is built over time. And that's a lovely document to look at to see how we've done that. We are evidence informed as well. So everything from educational research, subject specific guidance, a lot of the research was had already been done by the British Nutrition Foundation. That's one of the reasons we work with partners, because they have done that research and they've used that research to build their flagship program, Food: A Fact of Life. And obviously that's the foundation of what our curriculum is built on. We also have the flexibility, and you'll see that we talk about that a lot. We want you to be able to use this as a foundation for your curriculum to help you, to save you time. You know your pupils best. And that means that what you can do is you can take any of our resources and you can do anything you want with them, use as little or as much as you want. And that's a key part of what we wanted to do as well. And I think we've done that really well. And part of these training sessions are about how you can utilize this curriculum for your curriculum. Diversity as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about diversity in a moment where we look at the subject principles. But you know, it's evidenced so well in our curriculum. It's so well in cooking and nutrition, and I'm sure you will do that in your schools already. They're talking about the cultures, the food, the context, the perspectives, to really broaden the pupils' understanding and experiences within our lessons, whilst doing the practical content that they will do in our lessons, which is amazing. And then obviously accessibility as well. When I was a subject lead, 2 years ago, and this is the really difficult thing, is do we really have the time to consider what our resources look like, how they are laid out, for pupils with SEND, clear instruction, reducing cognitive load, thinking about the inclusive design of everything from the format of our lessons to the color schemes. We just simply don't have time to do that in schools. So we've done that for you, and that's what you'll find in all of our resources, that accessibility principle embedded throughout. So our aims and purpose then. So how do you take a curriculum, a through curriculum, key stage 1 to 3, and then put it into 2 sentences? Very difficult job to do. Luckily, I was working with Francis and Roy, and this is it. So this curriculum equips pupils with practical food skills and develops their understanding of healthy and sustainable diets. I really like the practical food skills there is straight away, because Francis talks about this very passionately. The pupils learn most when they're up and about, and they're using that knowledge which we've taught them in a practical sense when they're making those recipes. And that is right there up front in that first sentence. They're going to be taught to make informed food decisions about food and drink, and celebrate food as an important part of different cultures, a source of nourishment, connection and joy. So that is the aim. You'll see this at the top of our curriculum explainer. And if you haven't had time to have a look at that, I really urge you, if you've got a spare 10 minutes, there's a lot in there, but it's really the thinking behind our curriculum. Every department, especially if you're in a secondary school, every department has to do this. You have to write your own aims or purpose. And, this is ours. This is for our curriculum. But I also hope that explainer will give you some ideas on how to frame your understanding of lessons and your understanding of your curriculum, and hopefully be able to then, talk about yours in a way from that if you haven't done that already. So I urge you to go and have a look at the curriculum explainer, which you will find on our website. So now we have obviously the Oaks subject principles. So these were developed right at the beginning, before we'd even kind of planned any lessons. And in the orange box is the first subject principle. You'll see a lot of the National Curriculum Programme of Study language in there, and that's almost what it was done. Is how are we going to make sure we cover what the programme of study wants us to cover? So every single subject starts with the same sentence: focus on the knowledge and skills specific to, and in this case, obviously, food and nutrition. And then what we do is we break it down a little bit. So planning, preparing, cooking a repertoire of predominantly savoury dishes, using a range of ingredients and cooking techniques, and of course the principles of nutrition and health. And if you've dug into the resources already, you'll see, we're covering all that. The sequencing of units to make sure that we're covering the preparation and cooking, healthy eating, the food provenance and the consumer awareness through our threads. You'll find all that. Pupils throughout this curriculum are also taught to plan, prepare, cook a wide range of mainly savoury dishes safely and hygienically. You'll see that in all the lessons as well. And then obviously applying that food knowledge to make informed decisions sustainably about nutrition and health. So that's breaking it down slightly, but that's the first subject principle that we used at the beginning when we were forming this curriculum. And then the second one, at Oak, we were really keen to draw out the diversity principle, which you saw in the Oak curriculum principles, but we also wanted to have that as part of the subject principles as well, because we thought that was a key area that we wanted to focus on. And it's much more than this, for a range of international cuisines. That doesn't cover any of it. And you will find in this curriculum we're talking about food, cuisine, culture, custom, all those different aspects, heritage, and how that develops, influences personal food choices. Cooking experiences, there's a reference to such a wide range of cultures, celebrations, everything to broaden people's exposure to diverse food and traditions. And again, dive deep into those resources, have a good look through those, because you'll see all of that is enacted within our curriculum. So for further reading, if you want to go into a little bit deeper on everything I've just talked about now, I really urge you to go and look at our curriculum explainer, have a little look through everything we've done there. And then obviously the sequencing is linked to that, which then obviously links to the curriculum resources, which hopefully lots of you have started having a play with and started using in your classrooms. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Sam. And I think it was always a wonderful reminder, particularly for me and Roy, having been so close to these lessons, to actually think back to when we first started and really thinking how carefully we looked at all of this. And I think Roy and I often say that people would never realise how much thought that goes into coming up with the kind of curriculum that we have. Okay, so Roy's going to carry on now, and he's going to have a look at the curriculum structure and actually take you through some of the lessons. So thanks, Roy.
Thanks, Frances. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I know time is precious, so we really appreciate you coming along tonight. So I'm going to do a little bit about the overview of the curriculum and what we did and how we did it. So first of all, how it was built. Well, we had some set parameters from Oak, and we knew we had 12 lessons per year across key stages 1 to 3, so over 9 years. So that's quite a good chunk of lessons. We also knew that it had to cover the national curriculum, D&T, cooking and nutrition. And also we wanted to make sure that we unpacked those programme of study sort of points, and you can see those on the screen here. So you can see, for example, at Key Stage 1, there are just 2 sentences to describe cooking and nutrition over 2 years. And when you move on to Key Stage 2, there's actually 3 sentences that describe everything you should be taught about food and nutrition over 4 years. So in fact, if you look at all of primary phase, there are actually 5 sentences to describe what should be taught. Now, if I have 12 lessons per year over 6, I've got a lot of content there. So we really did have to think hard about what is the content here? How do we look behind this? How do we look at progression, for example? And of course, when I move on to Key Stage 3, over 3 years, there are actually 4 sentences that should be covered. And again, that's quite a hard thing to look at. And we looked at all the details on this learning and the different outcomes and key learning points for all of the 108 lessons. So this was our backbone, but we did lots of expanding. So we looked at all the different points and we thought, so what does this mean and how does it progress? So if I looked, for example, at nutrition and health, I might start with something simple, that we all need food. I might start with something simple as well, like I need 5 a day. I could then move on for example, using the Eat Well guide. I could then move on to talk about food providing energy and nutrients. I could then look at perhaps those energy and nutrients having different functions and different sources. And perhaps then lastly, I could look at health and needs and things like that. So there's quite a lot you can start to unpack when you analyze it very, very carefully. We also looked at lots of other documents too. So we took these into consideration. So the core food competencies for children and young people. So this is a government document that was published a fair while ago, but it still has resonance nowadays too. We also looked at the DFE teacher framework documents, which look at about what teachers should know and be able to do when they're teaching food and nutrition in primary and secondary schools. As well as, of course, we looked at the Food A Fact of Life programme as well, and the series of key facts which have been developed as basically the spine of the Food A Fact of Life education programme from the British Nutrition Foundation. We also looked at good practice. So we looked at the practice documents from the Design and Technology Association, as well as Food A Fact of Life, the competencies, and also the characteristics of good practice documents too. And we also looked at reputable sources of information. So we had meetings with people that look after the Eat Well Guide, for example, with government. And by talking to them, we produced a simplified version, particularly at year 3, year 4, for example. We also took advice from the Food Standards Agency, particularly around allergens and food safety. We also looked at DEFRA data, as well as UNESCO, for example. So we were looking at reputable sources too. We also wanted to make sure when we were looking at those food skills, which are going to be developed from year 1 through to year 9, that it was based on research and also best practice too. And we also wanted to make sure that the learning was first. So we wanted to make sure that we understood as we went through all of it, what the pupils were going to learn. And if it happened to be a practical lesson, then secondly, what recipe could we use to help to illustrate or demonstrate that learning? And that was really important for us. We didn't just start with a bunch of recipes and then work it out the other way. It was always about what key learning should be taught first of all. And also we wanted to make sure throughout the whole curriculum there was sort of like a social and cultural connection, because this is really about food and our lives, isn't it? And it's about, Sam's mentioned, our heritage and our different culture as we go forward. So this was a really important thing. Even something as simple, for example, there's a lesson on Chelsea buns, and we look at the history of the Chelsea bun and where it came from in London, for example. So just setting the scene, a bit of historical context, but that's actually to make something really delicious and learn other aspects too. And lastly, we did have a discussion with an expert panel of different people, which included food teachers too. And I'm really pleased that we had those, because it was fantastic. There were many other things that we also did. So, for example, we looked at every single recipe and we reflected them against the Eat Well Guide. So we know that nearly 90% of all the recipes that we've chosen have fruits and vegetables, for example. We also looked at a curriculum statement which Sam has been through, and I love that curriculum statement. It took a long time to write, but we're really pleased with what we come up with. So we started with that. Then we came up with the different unit titles, which were the next step. So what are these big, bold things that we're going to do? And even the unit titles, we wanted to make sure that we showed some type of progression running forward. So on the right hand side, you might see Unit 1, where it says independent and confident cooking. If you then go down to Unit 5, it says cooking techniques and proficiency, for example. And then later on, it goes number 9, accurate and precise cooking. So just a slight nod to progression running through. Once we've done the unit titles, we then worked on all the lesson titles too. And this was quite an interesting thing to make sure that the lesson title really reflected what would be taught and learnt too. And then lastly, we did all the lesson content. I'm going to quickly show you that content now, but not for all of the lessons, you'll be pleased to hear. So the lesson overview then. So as Sam's mentioned, it's fully sequenced, linked to the curriculum, and flexible, accessible and diverse. So it's yours, take it, it's free. What a great present, eh? There are 108 lessons and there are 12 for each year. So year 1 to year 9. My advice is to look through and pick bits which are good for your pupils. So if you work in a secondary school, don't be afraid to go and look at Key Stage 2. Or perhaps you're in Key Stage 2, look at Key Stage 3. You can mix things up and you can always adjust them for your pupils too. And it's a great range to expand your resources that you have. Lessons are progress as they go through. So we really make sure that they link and go through from year 1 right the way through to year 9 using those threads that you can see just on the right hand side. So consumer awareness, food culture, hygiene, for example, all those things weave right the way through the curriculum. And although they do this, you can always just take a lesson out and have it as a standalone lesson too, which is quite a challenge, but I'm pleased with what we've come up with in the end. And everything is flexible. So just take what you want, whether it's one lesson, one slide, or just a worksheet, or perhaps everything. It's yours to use. And you could use it perhaps to, when you're auditing lessons yourself, you can perhaps change your lesson and add some of the bits from Oak just to help too. And there's lots more that you can find up. So you can catch up on the recordings, which Francis mentioned at the beginning, to find out more about what we've done. So we've been through all of this. So in the lessons, there are four units per year. There's the same topic each time. So it starts with cooking, then there's healthy eating, a provenance, and then a social context. And that means you can map it right the way through from year 1 through to year 9. There's a really good description for each of those units. And what I really like as well is there's that why this, why now statement. And I think that's quite powerful. Do have a look at that. And it's really good if you're writing your own schemes of work or schemes of learning. I think that's quite a good thing to do. Maybe just don't, you don't have to use what we've put, but I think it's a great learning principle to have when you're developing your own work. And each lesson has a different sort of set of parameters. So everyone has an outcome, key learning, then we have lots of key words, a teacher tip, which I think is really helpful. And then we have common misconception, which is sometimes a great way to start a lesson. And then we have resources too. And those resources include things like slide decks. So each of the 108 lessons all have this. So slide decks, there's quite a lot of slides in them, but you pick and use what you want. And there's some also great Oak characters there to bring it to life too. There's also videos for each of the lessons. There's a video which has been recorded and it goes through the lesson for the pupils. It's very pupil facing. So perhaps you could use that in different ways. It could be used to inform your own practice, or perhaps pupils could follow it in independent study, for example. There's also worksheets. So there's 108 different worksheets for all the lessons. And there's also quizzes. So there's a starter quiz and there's an exit quiz. And what I really like is there's also some answer sheets too, which you can't go wrong with that really, can you? There's also, for practical lessons, there are different recipes and there's additional information. And Francis is just going to say a few more words about these resources.
Thanks, Roy. So with the additional information, these have been put together to provide some additional guidance for teachers, whether primary or secondary. It contains the recipe, but also contains some information around cooking practicalities as well, because we know everybody's setting is different, particularly if you're in a primary setting. You may just have your normal classroom that you've got to do your food activities in. So you've got to think about how you can set that up safely, and the number of pupils you've got, the number of pieces of equipment, etc. So we've given some guidance as to whether you might want to think about doing the activity in pairs, for example, so the pupils can share the ingredients and share the equipment. We've also included some information around modifying the recipe, so that gives you and your pupils some choice, and thinking about perhaps changing the starchy carbohydrate that might be in it, or adding meat or fish, or changing the dairy. There's also some advice around setting up your classroom. So that's as a blog. We've got one of those for primary, but also we've got a blog for secondary as well. And you'll see on there, there's some information about risk assessments. Now, we haven't included in the resources specific risk assessments, because what we wanted to do was actually direct people to the national organisation that's responsible for health and safety for lessons in schools, particularly around practical subjects like art, D&T and science, and that's CLEAPS. So hopefully your school is a member of CLEAPS. Most schools are. If you don't know about it, then please do speak to your science department, because they're probably the ones that have got the registration details. We've also got a little bit of information around health and safety, and that normally says that adult supervision is required. And then we've added some information about ingredients as well. And the main thing about that is around allergy and intolerance awareness, but also being aware of any cultural or ethical reasons why your pupils might not be able to handle or eat certain ingredients. And we've given a bit of guidance around the things to be thinking about. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was around practical food work, and particularly embedding knowledge. And Sam said right at the beginning that this is the bit that I get very excited about, because I do love the recipes that we've included. But we think it's really important just to make sure that we highlight that it's not just cooking. So there are some wonderful recipes that the pupils can make, but they do have a purpose, as Roy said. So it's all about the skills and knowledge that is going to be used in order to make that recipe. So in the primary phase, 6 out of 12 lessons are practically based, and then 8 out of the 12 in secondary. And practically means it could be a recipe that they could be making, or it could be part of a recipe, or it could be a sensory analysis, lots of different practical activities they could be doing. And we have weighted them to reflect the practical nature of the subject. As we all know, and Sam said earlier, pupils learn by doing. So we want them doing, we want them to get hands-on with the food, with the ingredients, and learning that way. But also we recognise that there's often minimal time in school for food education. So we want the pupils to learn lots of other things in the practical activities that they're going to be doing. Food skills are also developed, and that's done in a progressive way. And Roy has mentioned some of this already, but we've taken into account the motor skills that pupils will have at certain ages, right from 5 up to 13 or 14. The research that's been done into food skill development for children, but also the teacher experience and teachers' own practice. We know teachers will have different levels of experience, skills and knowledge, so trying to sort of take that into account. The complexity of the recipe has increased, so something could be quite low complexity in year 1, for example, and some of the ingredients may already be prepared for the pupils to use. The weighing and measuring might be done for them, etc. But as they get older and we go through the key stages, the recipes get increasingly complex. We also get the pupils to think about being more accurate and precise. And the one way I like to talk about this is around spreading and the activity of spreading. Now, spreading, for most people, you think, oh, spreading's the same, no matter which way you do it and how old you are. But think about how precise and accurate a 5-year-old might be when spreading perhaps some butter or spread on a piece of bread, to then how accurate and precise a child who's 13 or 14 might be. So it's still the same action, it's still spreading, but it's much more accurate and precise in what they're doing. And then ultimately we've got longer recipes involving more components, which we need the pupils to start thinking about dovetailing perhaps. And there's an example on the screen here, which is mushroom and bean burgers with flatbreads. So that's 2 recipes within the 1 lesson. So hopefully you'll see there's quite a lot of progression with that. The other thing is about making sure that we've reflected the importance of embedding applied knowledge. And there's a lot of subject content here. Roy mentioned about the national curriculum and all of those sentences. Although it doesn't potentially give a lot of detail for teachers, there is a lot to cover. So we've put a lot of content in, but we've tried to get that across as part of the practical activities. But there is more that can be added. So if you've got more than 12 lessons, there's other sources of resources and information that you could go to, such as Food: A Fact of Life, for adding to those lessons. So one of the things that we wanted to do, as we said, was about thinking about additional knowledge that can be taught through the practical activities. And anybody knows me will know that food hygiene and safety is something that's very important to me. And so we've definitely covered that, and that's sort of a basis that pupils need to know how to keep themselves safe, and also the recipes, the food that they make, so they're safe for somebody else to eat, but they also understand the theory behind that. So we've added that into it as well. We've also covered provenance, so where food comes from, and that is done in a progressive way, and so lots of lovely information for the pupils to know, and encouraging around using local ingredients, seasonal ingredients too. And then also thinking about sustainability. Now, this is going to become more and more important over years to come. So we future-proofed these resources by including lots of information around sustainability. And the slide you can see on the presentation at the moment is around using fish and actually sustainable sources of fish. The other things that we've included are the science of food. It's really important that pupils understand how and why their ingredients work, and the combinations of ingredients and the functions of them. So in Key Stage 3, we've really built on that, and we've provided the pupils with lots of really good information around the food science, which will help them with transferring knowledge as well, not only from their food lessons, but also thinking about their science lessons too. We've got lots of information and activities around the sensory aspects of food, lots of different types of evaluations that you could do with the pupils, and then also thinking about diversity, food culture and heritage, which Sam said right at the beginning is such a big part of everything that Oak does, and we've tried to translate it into the cooking and nutrition lessons. And the slide on there talks about foods from North Africa and Jamaica as well. So thinking about really bringing into the pupils' knowledge different cultures around the world. Health and nutrition, obviously, that's such a big part of what they should be learning in food and nutrition. So we've given the pupils ideas how they can modify their recipes, how they can think about different cooking methods, but also we've introduced we sort of call it state of the nation health information. So we've used the most recent NDNS data. So that's the National Diet and Nutrition Survey data. So we've informed the pupils around perhaps some of the nutrients that are of concern at the moment. So iodine particularly is one. So we've included the most up-to-date information for the pupils to learn and the teachers to teach. And then, of course, there's always going to be information and teaching around maths and English, and then also RE as well. And the recipe we've got on there at the moment is a really lovely example of that. It's a paska, which is a Ukrainian traditional Easter bread. And I thoroughly recommend you have a look at this one, because you can see in the picture how lovely it looks, but it tastes delicious too. Thank you, Roy. Okay, so I'm now going to pass back to Roy, and he's going to talk about some of the support and the resources available to you.
Great, thank you, Frances. Thanks for going through that. Yeah, there's a load of stuff there. I think you'll really like it, and there's 60 recipes in total which you can get. But the main thing is, yes, there's the recipe, but there's all the other learning as well, which progresses from Key Stage 1 right the way through to the end of Key Stage 3. So let's see what else is available just to help and support you going through the Oak stuff. So in addition to the Oak materials, which I'm sure many of you have been to the Oak website, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of that just in a sec. The British Nutrition Foundation has also developed a few extra resources just to help. First of all, there's an interactive CPD planner, which I think is fantastic. And it's just a downloadable Excel file, and you rate yourself on different competencies, and it suggests different types of training you could undertake. Now, as it's an Excel file, only you ever see the results. So be honest when you're filling it in. There's also training and resource decision tree that you can access. And that's a great way to look at the different resources and explore the Oak materials in a slightly different way using an interactive PowerPoint. There's also another one where you can look at if you've got maybe not just 12 lessons a year, maybe you've got 20 lessons a year, you're very lucky, or perhaps you've only got 6 lessons. And what we've done is to produce a resource that will help you think about what lessons should you pick and why should you pick them in a certain way. And as Frances mentioned earlier, the Oak materials go up to 12 lessons, but if you're teaching more than 12 lessons per year, we also have additional resources from Food Factor Life, which we've sort of managed to sort of shoehorn in an interesting way to ensure that progression remains too. There's also the curriculum planner decision trees, which I think are great. And there's some audit tools too, as well as a smart goal planner. So there's lots of there that you can access. And they're all available from the Feed a Fact to Life website, which I'm going to show you just in a sec. Also on the Feed a Fact to Life website, there's lots of other support. So some of you who may get the email might have noticed last week they just launched the recipe support packs. Worth having a good look at those. There's lots of support around teaching and learning. So if you're just new into teaching, or perhaps you're a non-specialist and you want extra support, I definitely have a look at that. And that's also links to their essentials course too. And there's lots of great practical videos that you can have a look at. So there's also toolkits that you can access, and also there's a newsletter too. So I'm going to have a quick look at trying to find those resources for you. So on the Feed a Fact to Life website, lots of you are probably very familiar with it. At the top, there's a lovely menu showing the different ages and stages you can look at. If you're just looking for the OAK materials, it's under professional development. You just click on that on the top. And then on the left-hand side menu, you go to OAK, and you can find out lots of things here. So there's details about the training, which you're on tonight, as well as other training that's coming up, which Francis is going to go through just in a moment. There's also information about planning your own CPD, which was last week, also about exploring the curriculum. And this one just in the middle here, the OAK curriculum units and lessons, was the Excel sheet that Sam talked about, where we have all of the learning mapped out from left to right, from year 1 right the way through to year 9. I think it's a great approach. And also what we've done, we've added all the individual web links from unit, also down to lessons, so you can go directly to those resources that you want. The support if you're planning your curriculum or thinking about refreshing it a bit later on, and then the catch-up videos too. If you're going to OAK, then this is the homepage, and it's an easy way to look at them. So whether you want teaching resources or curriculum plans, pick your key stage. So let's say key stage 3 for argument's sake. Pick the subject you're interested in, and cooking and nutrition is separate. It makes it so much easier to access the resources. So click on that. Then you can filter it. So I'm going to go to, let's say, year 8, for example. I can then look at the units that are available. So I'm interested in more sustainable diets. And then there's the different lessons here. So there's a theory kind of base lesson, as well as 2 practical lessons here, which really do embody the theory that we've gone through in the plant rich and diverse lesson. And as I mentioned, to all the resources, this is where all the lesson slides are, some of the details, the learning points, the keywords, the misconceptions too. There's the video, and then there's all the worksheets and quizzes too. So there's a whole vast range of stuff there for you to use. Thanks, Francis. I'm going to hand back to you.
Great. Thanks, Roy. Glad that worked. OK, so now what we're going to do is just very quickly go through some next steps for you. So as Roy said, it would be great perhaps if you could have a look at the primary and secondary areas on OAK, become familiar with them. There's a lot of information on there, but once you get used to it, it's quite intuitive, so you'll be able to find what's there. Perhaps audit what you currently do and identify any gaps, because it might be that you just need a couple of lessons that you need to supplement what you do now, or you want to completely rethink it and use all of the lessons potentially. So lots of opportunities for you there. We recommend that you try out a few lessons, certainly try out the recipes. We've tested the recipes, but it's always good to have a go at the recipes as well, because different people's ovens work in different ways. So you might want to adjust the timings, for example. And then, as Roy mentioned, there's some great resources for you to use on Feed a Fact to Life too. So Roy's put together some really fun ways of looking at CPD, and particularly doing an audit and things. So they're there for you to use. And then do join us next time. So next time we're actually going to be doing 2 webinars on one day. So on the 21st of October, we're going to be looking at particularly teaching in primary schools. and that's going to be at 4 p.m. and then we're going to do a similar sort of thing but for secondary schools, and that will be at 7 p.m. So do join us for either or both of those, and then we've got some other training going right the way through until February. Okay, right, so thank you very much, that's brilliant. There haven't been any questions in the chat, Roy and Sam. If anybody does have any questions that they'd like to ask us, please do pop them in the chat now. I've got a couple of questions actually, so Sam and Roy, if you'd be able to join me, that would be fantastic. We did have some other questions, but I think we've probably covered those in the session. So one of the ones is around being new to teaching and where to start. And I think that the Oak resources and lessons are fantastic for new teachers. They're a really good framework. But perhaps, Sam, if I come to you first, perhaps, if you could, have you got any ideas or any support that you could offer to a trainee or new teacher?
I think with my perspective, it is well, first of all, come and see U2. That's a key thing. BNF has a lot on there, don't they? Using the range that you've got, there are so many organisations which now kind of help. So obviously you've got the Food Teacher Centre. That's a really good place to start. The curriculum from the Food, a Fact of Life, and then also our curriculum as well. I think if you jump straight into our lesson resources, I think it's a really good way to start. I would maybe do that first, looking at the first key stage that you need to teach. So if it's in year 7, go to our first lessons in year 7, have a look through that unit, see the sequencing that we've done, and then start to download those resources. And I think it's sequenced so well that if you are new to teaching, it gives you access to everything that you need all in one package. Like Roy has said, you can download as much or as little as you want. It's got all the quizzes. The slide decks are there for a 50-minute to an hour lesson, and everything is there that you could possibly need. Obviously, if you have more experience, you might use less of that. You might want to reduce the content of the slide deck down. You might want to do more things live, like we've got demonstration videos, for example, in a lot of our lessons. You might not want to do those. You might want to do those by live modeling them or aspects of that. But I think if you are a new teacher or a non-specialist, then the Oak resources are a really good place to start, because it gives you everything that you could possibly need to be able to teach these lessons, apart from obviously the room and the ingredients. So that's a good place to start.
Fantastic, thanks, Sam. And Roy, is there anything that you can add to that?
I would just say two points really, I suppose. The first one is that everything's been written for you. So maybe think about auditing what you think you need. So how are you with classroom management? How are you with your nutrition knowledge, your sustainability knowledge, and so forth? And then where you might need some support, go to those lessons and just basically mug up. Just have a look at that information, because it's all there for you. You don't need to share that with the pupils. It could just be for you to have. So I think they're really good as a CPD tool for you to use. The second one really relates to recipes. And when I was training to be a food teacher myself, my lecturer gave me one invaluable piece of advice, is to cook them at home yourself lots of times. And by doing that, you can really see where the pressure points are, where all the kids are going to be demanding the same piece of equipment at the same time, but also kind of anticipating where things might go wrong, why they go wrong, and how you correct them. So I think there's lots of support available on the Oak curriculum just for those two things too.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Thank you both. I think that's really helpful. And then there's just one other question, which I think will be really helpful for those with us tonight who are from a primary setting. So the question is, I'm in a primary school with just a standard classroom. Is cooking with my pupils practical? And how can the Oak resources help me with that? So Roy, I'll come to you first this time.
Okay, thanks, Frances. What we've been really mindful when we've been developing the primary resources is really think about the equipment that you may have available, the room, the air, and so forth. So, for example, in Key Stage 1, they're all non-heat, which makes life a lot easier. We also talk about small groups, doing things in pairs or in small groups, for example, when you're organising that. And in the additional information which Francis mentioned, we also have some sort of classroom management tips. And it might be something as simple as, you know, having a central island where ingredients are, and pupils come in pairs to select the ingredients that are available rather than just having them all on their desks, for example. So there are small things, I think, that can be done using the oak materials. And I think we've been quite mindful of this. Also, we've tried to pick recipes that have not too many ingredients and not too expensive. So you're not going to find anything like lobsters and so forth within that, but you are going to find a range of different recipes. And we're encouraging schools that maybe grow food at school to use that produce too. So we're trying to interconnect that learning.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sam, anything to add?
No lobsters. There is mackerel pate though, which is very impressive. Not much to add to that. I think one thing I'm going to post in the chat now though is you'll find in the additional materials that Roy's talked about, there is a blog that was written, and that has got lots of additional information on how you can be supported in teaching or, you know, the support of teaching this in a primary classroom. And there's also a little guide there as well. It's a spreadsheet you can download, which has got lots of different things on there, which will give you a little bit more support in what you can do, which Roy's obviously talked about. So yeah, use that link, click on that, click on the guide, and have a look at that, which hopefully will support you a little bit more in using these resources in the curriculum. And then also make sure you join the next webinar, which is all about primary and this curriculum in the primary, coming up on the 21st, is it? I've got it written over here, yeah. So make sure you join that as well.
Brilliant, that's fantastic, thank you. Well, thank you both so much. I think you've provided everybody with lots and lots of information tonight. It's always really good to go back to the principles and really talk through how they were built, how the lessons were built, the curriculum, etc., but then also the support that's available. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. As I said at the beginning, particularly after a busy day, I hope that you found it helpful. If you could complete the evaluation for us, please, that would be great. And as I said, you would be provided with a link to a downloadable certificate that you can add your name to and then print off or save for your records. So I hope you have a lovely rest of evening and look forward to seeing you on our next training, which is on the 21st of October. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.